All right. Welcome to another episode of Valued Pursuit. My name is Patrick Davitt. I'm here with my co-host, Tyler Stegmann. Tyler, how we doing?
I'm doing awesome. Very excited. Episode 5, moving right along. Had our first guest on the last episode. A special friend of mine, Joseph Rendina. We had an awesome time speaking with him. There's so many knowledge bombs in there between Patrick and Joe and myself, all being entrepreneurs and going through our life course thus far. So definitely head over to, if you're listening to this on YouTube, for the visual or the audio files on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure if you did enjoy it, leave us a review and comment down below what you learned from it. So
Yeah,
today's going to be
absolutely.
exciting too, for sure.
Yeah, so we have so many ideas, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do this one now, which we're titling Valued Sticktoitiveness, which it is a definition. I've been defining a lot of things, as I often do, because we're now in February and we're now 1 month into the new year. So a big thing that we had talked about was this concept of New Year's resolutions. And I've done social media posts and things like that to not downplay New Year's resolutions, but to bring it into the scope and context of why does it have to only be now? What if it was in the middle of June? Why can't I do these resolutions and change? Or, and that we've talked in many previous episodes, go and listen to them, about the concept of, now is the only time you have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we said we're 1 month in. Anyone who's on this New Year's resolution journey, the statistics are not great and they don't seem to really be getting better. Right? So that's what brought us to want to talk to you and between ourselves about this whole concept. Right, Tyler?
Absolutely. Why don't you tell them the statistics, because they're pretty profound on how many people actually follow through with their resolutions that they set forth.
Yeah, and I teach research methods, and when it comes to people giving stats and things like that, it's data, and it's all based on surveys. It's based on, it could be 1,000 people, it could be 100,000 people. The whole concept is we use what we have at our disposal and we base our recommendations. And we talked about evidence-based practice and all these different things. So, but in general, a lot of people always have goals that they have in mind. And then we get at almost 40% of people will blatantly define a New Year's resolution. It's much higher when you get to a slightly younger population. So like the younger adult, like 18 to 35, 18 to 40. A majority of the New Year's resolutions are to get in better shape. Almost half, it was just under 50%, want to be more fit and or want to exercise more. Here's the staggering one. Within the first week, 23%, almost 1 out of 4, so at least 1 out of 5, will quit within the first week. So that's pretty staggering. So if you have 4, let's say 5 people, almost guaranteed based on the statistics, one of them is not going to follow through within 1 week. There's 52 weeks in a year. There's many more weeks in your entire life. The other one is that when you get to the first month, it's about 35%. Only 35% are still left. So if this was somehow a race in the game of life, which for many people it is, or it is, a game of my health, my fitness, my life, only 35% left after the first month. And that's where we're at now, Tyler. So that's kind of the reason why we came to this. And then the last one was just under 10% actually keep their New Year's resolutions continuously. And you get to 6 months, that's a really big milestone. And when you get to 1 year, it's an even bigger. Those numbers jump up exponentially, that if you can stick to it, stick-to-itiveness, for 6 months, and then once you get to a year, it's sort of this huge inflection point where you're much likely to stick to it, go back, listen to Valued Habits, because it's then become a lifestyle, it's become a habit, and it's not just a trend, it's not just something that you're randomly picking up. So how about you?
I think that's good. I definitely want to talk about how we're going to come out with our 25-day challenge too, and it's something that we can, for ourselves included, benefit from, but also the listeners more importantly. We're currently in the process of designing it, but it's going to be something that's for beginners and also for experts. And those challenges will be applicable to, again, the, where you are currently in your life. If you're just trying to get started, if you are, just joining the gym or whatever you're setting forth, like Patrick was saying, for your New Year's resolution, so to speak. And if you're also trying to elevate your life to the next level, and maybe you are someone who's been working out your entire life and you want to, achieve a PR in the gym, or you want to try something new, or you're going to compete or something like that. And we're really excited about it. We're going to break it down into simple steps that are basically going to be able to get you started and keep you going. And we're going to talk about today too a lot of the things that we use for our own daily pursuit, and to keep ourselves accountable on the things that we said we want to do and get done. So
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. And when I think of, again, when you get to, those specific days, things like that, where you can see even at this month. So when you get to 25 days in, things like that, that's where that big drop off. So we're going to help build and help people continue on their lifelong journey. When I think of a lot of words, and I read a lot, I listen a lot. You and I converse, every day. We're going back with motivational text quotes, all these different things. There's a lot of commonality, and that's one of the things that I'm almost struck by. But then at the same time, the more I get into this stuff and we get into this stuff, it's I'm not as struck by it. So I think of words and I think of what are the commonalities, and we talk about, all right, we want to have these resolutions. What are resolutions about? It's about imparting some type of change, and we'll get into change a little bit later. But I think of this concept of routine. Most of it is, what is it? Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So if someone has a resolution, that concept is, well, I want to do something differently. I want to strive and achieve something. So I think of the general thought that comes to mind is my routine. And then I know the word that you and I have talked a lot about is identity. And that's the word that has come up more often than any other word when I've listened to any of these gurus, Andy Frisella, Ed Milet, Tony Robbins, Tom Bilyeu. The list goes on and on and on and on. And it all stems to this concept of identity. So when it comes to your identity, how do you define yourself? And I wrote down like self-perception, self-confidence, self-worth. And a big part of that is then, well, the first thing you need to do is self-awareness. Like you need to sit down and take stock of who am I? What am I doing? And then what's my general routine? If this is the resolution, here's where I'm trying to go. Well, I first need to know where I'm at. That's famous quotes. A ship that has no clue which harbor it wants to sail to, for that ship, no wind is favorable. So, because it's like, well, which way do you want the wind to blow? And it's like, if I don't know where I'm going, then who cares? Cheshire Cat said that in Alice in Wonderland. Alice said, I want to go. And he said, well, where do you want to get to? And she said, well, anywhere but here. Or she said, it doesn't really matter. And he said, well, if it doesn't really matter, then it doesn't matter which way you go. Right? So that's a big part of what we're going to get into, like the specifics, and we'll talk about goals and all these different things. But what do you think of when you hear this word identity as it relates to whatever routine, whatever change?
James Clear talked about that too in Atomic Habits. He used the airplane example with, if they change the heading just, a couple degrees, the plane can end up landing not in New York if that's your destination, but in Washington. So it's like, I think it's, again, how we talk about not having the outcome-based habits, but having the identity-based habits, because we want to, and you talk about this too, live our vision and our most ideal, so to speak, destination in life before it happens. And then I was listening to an interview from the owner of Bear Performance Nutrition, Nick Bear, and he was saying how in the military they teach you how to go from like your destination of A to B, but you actually go backward. So you kind of plan out like where you're going to end up and all the things that can happen in your pursuit of where you're going to end up, like at the end destination and then to the start point. So it's like reverse engineering kind of like your vision of how it's going to play out, and not kind of like where you are currently, but kind of where you want to end up. So you kind of fake like, oh, I'm at that point already, and then you kind of go back to like where you are currently, and you think of all the subsequent steps that it's going to get to basically get to your goal. So I think the power in the identity-based habits is it holds you accountable to being consistent and being disciplined on a daily basis to eventually achieve that person that you want to be. Um, again, if you have an outcome, well, once you get to the outcome, then you kind of stop, and then you have to create another goal and get more momentum and continue forward, and so on and so forth. So if you have the identity and you try and, like we always say, live like that person would live, well, then you can change a lot more things than just trying to kind of get to one goal, and then you got to the goal, and then it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? So I think having identity based habits, and ultimately trying to figure out what your identity is, and how do you do that? That's kind of the next question, and I'll let you maybe answer some of that too, Patrick. But I think that's based on doing a lot of things and taking inventory, like Pat was saying, on like who are you currently, kind of what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what are you good at, what do you struggle with, what are your gifts, and kind of taking inventory of all those things. And then once you kind of have a better understanding of that, then you can kind of understand who you are as a person right now. Who do you ultimately wish to be? And when you ultimately wish to be that person, then you can formulate that identity and live like that person every day, and ultimately get to that point, versus just setting one goal, which, goals are great, and I think they're kind of the preliminary thing that for beginners to be able to learn how to do something that you say you're going to do, which we're going to talk about as well. And doing it, because that builds confidence. You're not going to gain confidence through sitting on the sidelines, so to speak, and not playing in the game, right? You have to get out into the arena of life and do things and learn and attempt things, and continue to move forward. And like we always talk about reflective practice, and practice is permanent. But like you just said, if it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. Well, Joe Rogan talks about how just moving is, people think by doing a lot of things makes them productive, but you can be a really busy person and be doing the same things over and over again, and if they're not serving for you to be the identity in which you wish to become, they're not going to align with the things that are going to want to get you to that point. So you have to really understand being busy is great, but you want to be busy and productive in your pursuit of who you ultimately wish to be, versus just being busy and having a lot of things going on in your life and you're not really making progress from the destination of A to B. So that's a little bit of a rant, but the point is again, kind of really understanding who you are, and then the identity in which you wish to kind of get to. And I think that's the power of identity, is we were talking about before we started recording, but you're not the person you used to be. And I know I struggle with that too for myself, with thinking of my past and the things that I may have done and things that I wish I would have done differently. Hindsight's always 2020. I know we've all heard that before, but you are in this present moment. You're not that person any longer. That person does not exist. And your future self, this is something you talk about, Pat, too, doesn't exist either. So the only thing you can do right now is focus on the controllables, right? And do something in this present moment that's going to help you move towards the direction in which you eventually wish to end up at a destination. So I think that's what we need to focus on. I'll let you kind of wrap your head
Dude,
around everything I said, but
my goodness, is there a lot to unpack for that? I came up with 2 quotes off of that and like 5 concepts. But I think so where to start? The big was visualization mindset. So you talked about this concept of identity. So I wrote, you have to identify the identity with which you would like to identify yourself as. So with all that I'm trying to unpack, the concept is we don't know who we're going to be in the future. We can't. You can look at the past and learn from it, but don't live there, right? You have to live in the present. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "The past is a history, the future is a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why we call it the present." So the idea is, who are you now? But we talk about the identity. And you have this aspect of visualization. Ryan Holiday every day says he starts his day and he is journaling and all these different things. You don't have to journal, but the idea would be anyone out there who potentially one thing I absolutely love, and it changes everything for me. If I'm not going to go to the gym in the morning and I'm going to get ready and go to work, I'll set my clothes out the night before. And for whatever reason, it's like mind boggling how much that just changes the flow of my morning because I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And that's, I think, a big part of it where you want to visualize, but prior to that, you need to know what to visualize. So you have to lay out your day. And when it comes to, this is where you get back into like the habits, but if it comes to the routines, like we have these New Year's resolutions, and for a lot of those are based on, I want to get more fit. I want to go to the gym. I want to stop eating, donuts and soda. They bring these to the break room. I stop on the way home. I want to stop smoking. I want to drink less. I want to be friendlier. I want to take the stairs instead of the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Most of them are about that. When it comes to that, it's you have to write down and find out. If you don't know, seek out what are the identity characteristics of this individual, which is the future version of me that I am striving towards. Because if, like we were talking, you were mentioned earlier, we have almost an infinite possibility of who you can become. Just pick out a general version that you'd like to strive towards. That should be your resolution. And the concept is now, all right, what can I do today to be and move on the path? You talked about that concept. What can I do to move on the path to become that person? You talked about the quote I have, do not confuse motion with progress. A rocking horse moves all day, but it doesn't get anywhere. So I was hearing something Gary V was talking about. He's talking about someone who, oh my gosh, I work so hard. And it's like, yes, not only do I work hard, and the other person was saying, oh, I work really smart. And then Gary V's like, well, I first work very smart, and then I take that smart working and I do it very hard. So it's like work smart first and then work hard. Even if you wanted to work hard, but at some point you're going to have to realize that, are you just spinning your wheels and you're not getting anywhere? So you talked about focus on controllables, and the idea is everything that you're trying to do, we talked about so far, is related to the word change. So you have to have some aspect of, what do I need to do to impart change? And at some point you need to just sit there, whether it's in the morning, and you have to just take a breath. I have take a breath and assess. And you can do that throughout the day. I mean, you get into mindfulness and meditation, all these different things. A big part of it is about awareness. Their favorite word is awareness. So you have to have awareness of where I am at and where I would like to go. So we have all these goals and we have all these things. Who is it? Alex? I don't know if I know how to pronounce his last name. Hormezi? He's got a ton of really cool things. And he had this one where, kind of the rocking horse, he talks all about, he had this one where he's like, affirmations are great, but shouting affirmations at yourself in the mirror, having all these quotes and having all these posts, that's not going to get the job done. And it's like, well, yes, that's true. However, you're already an individual who does a ton. So you don't need that, because you now already identify yourself as someone who is productive and who's going to get it done. Whether you struggle with it, you're already there. And we can get into, the behavioral world where you talk about trans-theoretical model, like stages of change, things like that. A big part of the message that we might be touching on right now is, well, all of those things to change your identity, have those aphorisms, have the positive posts, have positive quotes and pictures of who you want to be, and all these different things that you want to do just to try and get yourself in the right state of mind. So mindset for me is that other really big one. I had another quote written down, and I know you and I were talking about it a lot, and then I'll let you sort of touch on it, where it said, Socrates said, the secret to change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And you have something that you wrote that we have like a bunch of shared documents, and it had to do with, you don't want to say out with the old, so you don't want to fight the old, but you can almost say out with the old. There's certain things in your life that you're never going to be able to get away from. But let's focus on the new. What new can I change? Where can I place myself in this same day that I'm living that allows me to walk on a path as though I was a different person. When people meet me, when they see me, what I'm doing, what I'm wearing, how I'm acting, how I talk, how I'm thinking. I mean, that's a different identity. And this is getting back again to identity, which is one of the first things that we talked about. So what do you think of that?
I really like before what you were talking about with simple things, and I like to we get into these really good conversations and we talk about all these people that have done amazing things and that we both learned from and so on and so forth, but kind of making it bite-sized pieces that everyday people can relate to. And we're everyday people as well. So you made the point about your clothes, just taking them out and organizing the night before. And I know Jordan Peterson, who you like a lot. I don't know what his background is, but he always talks about behavioral therapy, and he
He's
says
a
when he's
clinical psychologist
clinical
with like 40
psychologist,
years of experience. And he's a professor.
he
He was a professor.
he talks about how with some of his clients, like he just unwinds, their kind of toxic behaviors that aren't serving them and trying to get down to giving them bite-sized pieces of things that they can do to gain a little bit of motivation, momentum, being able to kind of get their life in the right order. And one of them is like just organizing your room. And there was something that I saw the other day from him that was so powerful, and it was talking about kind of the same concept, but how your conscience, your subconscious may come in and say, "Oh, well, this is not that important. I don't need to organize my room. It's not something that um, is relevant to me right now. It's really not that bad." And your room may be super messy, and there's nowhere for you to kind of put anything, so on and so forth. But then you want to go and do all these bigger things. You may want to be at a financial standpoint in your life, or be in a certain physical kind of shape, or have um, social connections, or change your friend group, or whatever it is. But he kind of talks about how, like, well, that's kind of bogus when you say that starting with cleaning your room isn't significant, because if you're not even able to start with something so small like that and follow through with it and complete the task, how do you think that you're going to be able to do these bigger things in your life that take all of these little kind of steps to eventually have the integrity, perseverance, discipline, consistency, motivation to get to? So it was kind of like we were talking about again before we hit record with like the reminders app on your iPhone, how powerful this is, and life changing for me. Like we talked about on one of our other episodes too, on having a calendar and staying organized. Like a lot of people nowadays have a smartphone, and it's a smartphone because it's supposed to make your life easier and not make you lazier, make you more efficient as a human. And we all have things that pop into our head, and Patrick and I say, write this stuff down, you're going to forget. And I realized after Pat and I have been advocating for that, I have been trying to do that every single time. If I'm not writing something down on a post-it note, on my calendar, on my vision board for longer term plan things, or on my reminders app, always like little things, to get my hair cut in 2 weeks, what time is going to work, when's the day that I'm going to go, I'll set a reminder of that exact thing on my schedule for the night before at 8 p.m. Because if Patrick wants to do a podcast at a certain time that evening, and I say, "Oh yeah, sure," in the moment, because I don't want to say no to Pat, and to most people, saying no is hard. We talked about that with Ryan Holiday. That's a skill in itself, saying no, I don't have time for that, not in an arrogant way, but saying that I'm doing something else. And if I say yes to that, well, then I'm giving up time from the other thing that I want to do. The point being is to get started, start with very extremely small things that anyone can start with. So we're going to have our 25-day challenge. And one of the things that we're going to do is just set a time for you to wake up tomorrow, and just get up at that time and use a 5 4 3 2 1 and wake up. Do not hit the snooze button. Or another one that Patrick and I were talking about is, if you have to pick up toothpaste on the way home from work and you don't have any more, and I'm guilty of this myself, I'll set a reminder on my phone, pick up toothpaste, get peanut butter, whatever you need at the two stores that are next to one another. Again, do it for, I get out of work at, let's say, 7 o'clock. I'll set it for 6 o'clock so I remember and I see it. Walk to my car. I don't put my address in for my house, because that's another thing, we'll use Waze to know when I'm going to get somewhere, because I can't predict if there's an accident, if a road's closed, if there's more traffic than normal, whatever it may be. So every day I use GPS because that will give me a more accurate representation of when I'm going to get to my destination. And aside from that, don't put your GPS address in for your home. Put it in for CVS or put it in for your supermarket that you're going to go to and get those two things. Go get those two things and then go home. And I guarantee you, by starting with littler things like that and doing that consistently on a weekly basis, when you have to do bigger things like Patrick and I sitting down having a podcast and having a conversation together right now, or if you have to make a phone call to a potential lead in your business, or you want to go to the gym and it's hard for you to go 3 times a week and you want to start going 5 days a week, these little things are going to make it more digestible for you to gain the, again, discipline, the consistency, doing it every single day, and ultimately the confidence by doing it. Patrick talked about that before, is building confidence is by doing things. Like, all these influencers talk about being confident and this and that, but there's far and few that talk about actually going out and learning how to build confidence. And by building confidence is by attempting things and doing things over and over again and refining them and doing a better job at it, not doing the same thing like Pat said before over and over again. That's the definition of insanity. So little stuff like this is so simple, and it's again like the affirmational quotes that Patrick and I talk about. Like, I've built my Instagram reel into like not being like dopaminergic things anymore. It's like motivational reels now because Patrick and I just send them to each other every morning, and it's amazing that I feel like so good after I look at those things, and it gives me like a surge of energy to go and get something done. And that's kind of the same concept of these little tasks, is it gives you confidence and energy to we talked about habit stacking last episode with Joseph Rendina, the CEO of Iron Health. It allows you to stack habits and build into bigger things and grow closer into that identity in which you wish to become. That's a tongue twister. So go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, no, I mean, so the concept of setting your GPS, and the concept there is be intentional. If there's one specific thing that you don't want to do, I have the things I talk about all the time, and everything boils down to change. I get my students all the time. They're, and we might have talked about this on a previous, but if they're going into anything related to health and fitness, healthcare, PT, OT, they're going to be a nurse, a dietitian, strength coach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The goal is you're probably going to want to get someone to do something differently, which ultimately is just change. And the idea is, well, you need to be intentional. You need to be very specific. But with that, to set the GPS to a specific store, that's very simple. Like, to break it down, I like you said, break things down into bite-sized steps. And the one thing I was thinking of, and an example of that would be, let's say for whoever's listening, you want to go to the gym more. You sign up. I mean, gosh, Planet Fitness. There's gyms that are $10 a month. No offense to these gyms. What do we think a lot of those gyms are hoping? That they have thousands and thousands of people that sign up for $10 a month. And well, it's only $10 a month. Doesn't really matter if I go, So it's, if you want to go to the gym more, bite-sized step. And you're at a true beginner. You feel awkward. You don't like that scene, things like that. You just don't know. You got to program that gym in to your GPS. You can plan it. The step above that would then be all these individuals that we're talking about, that Tyler was just saying, is you then need to plan that in. Hey, if I'm going to leave work at 3, 5, 7, whatever it is, you can't say it takes 30 minutes to get home. Well, if I leave at 5, hey, I'll be home at 5:30. Or to whoever it is, even to yourself. The idea would be you got to program in, that 30 minutes. And then when it comes to the gym, repetition is the mother of learning. Repetition is the mother of skill. We repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is a habit and not a single act. Become habitually doing what you want to eventually do. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to fail. It's okay to feel awkward. We've all been there. Everyone's at a different journey, but the idea is when you go to the gym, step 1, go to the gym, walk over to a treadmill. Even if all you want to do is lift weights, I'll try and push cardio as a cardio guy or as an exercise physiologist. Go to the treadmill and just stand on it. Even if we're talking like basics, beginner. I don't even want to be there. Step one, stand on the treadmill. Okay, walk over to the dumbbells. Just randomly start picking them up. Hey, how heavy is a 10 pounder? How heavy is a 25? Can I pick up the 40? Can I pick up the 50? And then leave. If that's your day and you're the individual who you've never done that before, that's a huge win. And guess what? That's one day you now got of in your checklist of I either made a choice. What is it? John Maxwell says every decision is a choice, and every choice you make makes you. And I always say those choices either bring you towards your goal or away from it. Hey, that's day one. Next time, do it again. Eventually, you're going to keep doing it. And now you're going to slowly start to shift your identity to what? I'm not a person who works out, but I'm a person who goes to the gym. Hey, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm going to the gym. What are you going to do there? I don't know. Treadmill, weights, even if you're just picking them up. What are you eventually going to do? You're going to stand on that treadmill and be like, well, this is boring. I might as well walk. I've stood on it for the past 10 days. Hey, I might as well pick up another one. Let me see if I can do something with this dumbbell and put it over my head. And then you keep progressing from there. That's where you then, I know the big scary part, if you're then in the next step, is how do we ask for help? I don't know what to do. That's why we have trainers. When we talk about coaches, one of the main purposes of a coach isn't just to tell you exactly what to do. It's to help you want to do it. And to literally coach you to do the motion. Forget about the specifics of the skill. We get into technique and all these different random things. So that's like a big one, because once you start doing that, it's like the law of inertia. Or you look at the laws of motion. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, but a body in motion tends to stay in motion. One of my posts I did not years, but like months ago, had to do it like habits being like a steel cable. If you keep doing that, go to the gym. If you keep avoiding another one years ago, let's say it's Dunkin' Donuts, let's say it's Starbucks, whatever, you stop on your way home and you always get this smoothie or you always get this slice of pizza, drive a different route. The more you keep doing it, eventually it's not going to be a hassle. It's going to become part of your routine. Now your identity is shifting to someone who's not doing that specific action, or in the case of the gym, who is doing that specific action. And a lot of that goes back to that whole identity. I think it was James Clear I think he was with Peter Attia. We're doing a lot of name dropping on this one. And you guys, shout out Mel Robbins, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a breath and assess. She's one who taught me to take the, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then boom. Now you can attack it. But he talked about this concept of identity. And if someone here, let's say you're a smoker and you're at a social gathering and someone says, hey, do you want a cigarette? And you say, oh no, I'm trying to quit. It's like, well, you're identifying yourself as a smoker. Instead, if you say, oh no, I'm not a smoker, they say, either way, they probably say, oh, no problem. So it doesn't affect their interaction. But now into your head, well, you're identifying not as a smoker. If you say, what are you doing tomorrow? And you say, I'm going to the gym. Okay, well, you're identifying as a gym goer. Are you working out? No, not yet. I just go to the gym. Oh, okay. Like all these little things, they sound silly, but how many people are stuck? All the statistics. It's not even getting into all these stats that I teach in class about how many people aren't even meeting the minimum recommendations for cardiorespiratory, let alone, strength. And it's like 30 minutes a day of moderate intensity. It's like moderate intensity is not that high, like to get into that intensity category. You just got to do 30 minutes total a day, 5 days a week. It's very small. And we're seeing all these staggering statistics of like 11 to 19-year-olds that like only 15% of them are meeting these. We don't require phys ed in a lot of different schools, and they're sitting all day, and then they're going home and they're sitting and they're doing this and they're sitting and they're doing that and they're sitting, so the idea. So a big part of all this is break things down, sort of to rehash a lot of that, break things down into bite size, be very intentional with what you're doing. You have to plan. And try and make life as simple as possible. There's a reason why all of these minimalist type based things are becoming so popular. Less can be a lot more. If you simplify what your general life is and what you want it to be, and there's less clutter and less just chaos, it's going to be a lot easier for you to psychologically manage what you're going to have to do tomorrow. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think the main thing is too, you had one on here, we're looking at our notes, like we say, we write things down, and you had anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can do it right. And I think that's just so powerful because
Jim
it's easy
Rohn.
for us to, some people will say, both of us are in great shape, both of us have a high level of education, um, we both have good lives, we have a roof over our head, so on and so forth. But you have to get started. And wherever you start, Andy talks about this a lot. Andy Frisella, owner of First Form, everyone's going to have an easier path than you. Everyone's going to have a harder path than you on the same path, and whatever your path is in life. So no matter what your circumstances are, you have to have blinders on who you are, what your situation is, and what can you do, like Patrick said before, to improve it. And that ultimately comes down to what can you control. And if you focus on all the things that you can't control, again, this is like why like detaching from your current being is so important. Jocko talks about this, is like, if you focus on the person you were in the past, and Patrick just talked about this, you were a smoker for 25 years and you want to quit smoking, and someone says, do you want a cigarette? And you say, um, I'm not a smoker. Well, that just negates the opportunity right away versus you're saying I'm trying to quit. Well, you're using what you've done for the past 25 years in the current present moment when you're not that person any longer and you wish to change, to dictate how you're going to handle a situation, versus focusing on the present and saying, I do not do that any longer. It does not serve me. The same concept if you're overweight or you're not happy with your physique, or you're not even, we can get into a whole nother conversation about physically how you look, but your actual physiological health is just something that's completely different. Just because you're jacked and look like you're in good shape means absolutely nothing about your blood profiles and your insulin sensitivity and et cetera. And Patrick and I could talk about that forever. Point being is that you need to focus on the present moment and what you can do to improve your situation and the identity in which you wish to become. And that's the power of understanding your identity, because that will allow you to focus on the controllables and the things that will, again, that I was thinking about before when you talked about the navigation. Like, it's the same thing with the heading in the airplane. And I forget what example you used about before, it's slipping my mind right now. But if you don't know where you want to end up, then you're not gonna know what steps it's gonna take to even get to that point. So the first step is figuring out what do you want to do and where do you want to be, and then you can focus on all the things like we talk about of that are in your control to help you get closer to that point. And the concept of this whole episode is like Jordan Peterson said, and like Patrick is saying, and I'm saying, if it's too difficult for you to do, and I think James Clear talked about it too, then you have to make it easier. You have to make it easy enough to the point where you're going to do it. If it's too hard or it's too easy, you're not going to do it. It has to be just right, like the Goldilocks rule. I think that's literally what it's called in this book. So you need to do something that you're going to be able to achieve, and then continually stack that over time once you become consistent and disciplined enough to do that without even having to think about it. And again, it becomes a habit and it's serving you. So whatever that is, no one's like, every episode we get on here, Patrick has spoken at so many different conferences. I always tell him how I aspire to be like him one day. He's so confident in his public speaking. Like, go back to like episode 1. I probably didn't sound as good as I do now. At least I hope I sound better now. But the point is it's like, you have to start, and the only way you're going to get better, once episode around 5, once 100 comes out, we're both going to sound much better than we do right now in this present moment. And it's the same concept with anything else in life. You have to be willing to do it poorly in the beginning to do it extraordinarily in the future. So just understand that we all are going through that same struggle regardless of your situation, and it's just going to take that first step, like Jocko talks about, for you to kind of get to the 5th step and get enough courage to get in the gym, or get enough courage to pick up that weight, like Patrick said, or get enough courage to post that Instagram reel, like Gary Vee always talks about, on something that you're passionate about, or starting a side business, or whatever it is. Like, you have to start, and you have to continue along your journey on a eventually daily basis to get good enough at it for you to really make some progress and end up where you want to be in the future. So I think that's what I would say about that. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, man. Confucius said, it doesn't matter how slow you go, so long as you do not stop. I think it was also him who said, do not underestimate the power of moderate effort applied consistently. And if it's just this fear, Babe Ruth has a great quote I say all the time. It said, do not let the fear of striking out prevent you from swinging in the first place. It's like, you're going to make mistakes. Mistakes are, my daughter her teacher has a quote above the door, and I love it. And it says, mistakes are proof that you are trying. And it's like, gosh, man.
And
It's like,
fear is a whole nother thing too. Like
yeah.
that's a crazy thing because I still struggle with that to this day. And like, when we had Joe on, like I told you how I got a little nervous in the beginning, and some people who know me can tell that. Other people said, "Oh, everything sounded great. It was a great episode." And what matters is Lewis Hose talks about this. I hope I'm saying his last name right. That he failed his he didn't fail. Andy was the one for Sella from First Form failed his public speaking course, but Lewis actually took like professional public speaking classes and stuff to get to the point where he is. And he used to shake and get so nervous. And the point is that fear is something that doesn't even exist. Like it's like a protective mechanism in innate nature, right?
False evidence appearing real.
Exactly. So it's something that like,
Fear.
and the 5 4 3 2 1, who was the
Mel
lady
Robbins.
he talks
She's
about
got, yeah,
she talks about the 5 4 3 2 1 what if it works out concept
Mhm.
too. And it's like the same thing. It's like we always think, myself included, of like, what if this happens, what if that happens, but what if that doesn't happen, and what if something really great can happen? And guess what? The only way that that can happen is by you starting and trying and putting yourself in the arena, so to speak, and getting off the sideline and attempting it. That's the whole concept of the attempts. Failing is not doing it. Goggins says, don't do it, you guarantee you're going to fail. If you don't try, you're never going to be able to be successful. So that's why we're preaching what we're preaching, like Kyle
Yeah,
just said.
and one of the I read something that one of the greatest ways or sayings to yourself, one of the greatest things you can say to yourself in order to guarantee that you'll fail is I'll start tomorrow. Because that's an identity shift. Because tomorrow doesn't exist. It never will. When tomorrow shows up, it's today. But if you have the mindset, I'll start tomorrow, you're never going to be in tomorrow. For whatever reason, I keep coming back to this main concept that, live in the present. And I mean, almost all of Eastern philosophy, everything they talk about has to deal with the present. And when you look at everything that we write down, all the people, I mean, how we name drop like 10 different, like massively successful psychologists and influencers and speakers and and those that are doing it, it's all about being present in the moment, being okay with who you are, being okay with the mistakes that you're making, just getting out there and trying it. I always say growth, well, growth was the one. Growth, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And the idea when it comes to growing, so whether you're doing something poorly, like that was Jim Rohn who said that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can do it right. The idea is even if you're doing it poorly, you now learned. Losing is a lesson. Loss is a teacher. So it's like learn from those mistakes, learn from whatever it is that made you feel awkward. Like the more you reflect on it, the more you're then going to be able to use it and allow yourself to grow, the more you can do. If you want to get, like you were just saying, in order to get to that fifth step, you got to be able to take the first one. And now, what was it? I gave an example. I wore a pedometer when I ran my 100-miler, and my Garmin said it was like 165 or maybe like 180,000 steps. The pedometer, which I trust that pretty darn well, said I ran like a 204,000 steps. And it's like after 34 hours and 21 minutes it took, 20 of those hours just were spent. Can you make it to the next tree? Can you just take one more step? Middle of the night, I can't see 10 feet in front of me. I can see my feet when I look down and I shine the headlamp. It's like, just take that foot, put it in front of the other one. Take the next foot, put it in front of the other one. And
so powerful. Yeah.
So everyone has to start somewhere. One of the things that we talk about a lot, I teach it in class, where do you start? So we want to grow. You got to be able to stretch yourself so you can keep growing and keep doing, keep moving forward. So, but if someone's saying, I don't know where to start, or maybe you're already in good shape, but it's like you just can't go that extra, step. And now you want to become like just in beast shape or whatever it is. I want to go for this job. I want to go and become a manager. I want to do this. My goals are now bigger. Well, where do you start? So I always say, start smart, smart goals, you know, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. I don't know. Do we want to break those down, or maybe we can put that in the show notes, and I'll put a link, to some examples of. But those smart. The whole concept is you want to be smart about what you're doing. You want to work smart. We talked about that earlier. So, anything else you want to
Yeah,
specifically add? Because
two things,
man,
and we can touch on that real quick if you
sure.
want. But the concept of, I know Ed Milet saying it, things, I don't know if I've heard other people say it too, influencers, are, so I always am a victim of this as well. I like to say that because I'm not sitting here on my high horse. The reason we talk about these things because we're implementing them into our daily lives, and we realize the benefits that they've had. Things aren't happening to me; they're happening for me. So you were talking about that before, like we made the on our outro for our last episode, just you being here and listening, whoever that is, even if it's one person, you're like already made the right step. You're here, you're trying to gain more knowledge about what we have to say and know that you could probably benefit from it, and you've made the first step to just, if you had to go and search for it, if you click the button on your phone, whatever you did, that was a step that you took to say, I'm going to listen to this episode and I'm going to learn something from it. Not even saying I'm going to learn something from it. I'm going to just listen to this episode, and maybe you did learn something from it. Um, you made the point about, just don't stop moving, and I was thinking about like CrossFit, um, and how like just anything in general, like these ultra endurance runs or any kind of massive challenge, and why exercise is always so profound and talked about on this topic is because whether you may not be breaking records, or you may be, the fittest in your gym or whatever it is that you're competing in, those kinds of like massive workouts or extremely long muscular endurance, fatiguing kind of sessions that you're having show you, like, you look at that stuff on the board when you come in, if you're just at like a box and you're not competing and you just joined, and you're like, how the heck am I ever going to get through all this stuff in like 15 minutes, or how the heck am I going to get through 100 reps of all of these different movements? And you set a clock and you do it and you get after it and you finish it, and you're like, wow. Like, and the concept is, well, you didn't stop and come back the next day and finish it. You just didn't stop moving. Like, you maybe weren't doing it at a record breaking pace, but you kept moving. And that's the concept, is that don't stop moving and you'll eventually get to your destination. And that's what we're preaching here. It's the same thing with VP, with Valued Pursuit, in which we wish to grow this platform. We're not going to stop. We're going to keep bringing on amazing guests. We're going to keep having amazing conversations. Patrick and I are going to delve into our expertise. Um, and we're always going to be providing stuff that is based on ourselves and our life that works, and also, like you said, evidence-based practice as well, because we're both clinicians. And it's just, I think that movement thing is so valuable that you made the point about. And that's like why all these influencers talk about being disciplined, because it's when you wake up in the morning, like, dude, when I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, which isn't even that early, and I have to go to the gym, and I get to the gym at like 6:45, like, I don't want to work out, but like some days I do, some days I don't. But the point is that I've done it to the point now so many times that I wake up, I don't listen to my voice in my head. I have these habits and these routines in place, and I know that, let's just say 3 days a week, I'm going to go to the gym at that time, and I do it. And I don't say, oh, I'm only going to do it if I feel like doing it. I'm going to do it regardless of how I feel when I wake up. So the SMART goal thing is very powerful, like you said, because it breaks it down into being very specific, like we talked about before, which is kind of getting towards, if you know the identity you wish to become, well, that's really specific and something attainable, which is another thing, the A in it, which is attainable. And being measurable is something to be able to understand, like stacking habits. If you measure it, you're going to be able to get to the next step if it's something that you're writing down and having track of, versus if you fall off one day or you get sick. These are things like that are out of your control, versus you taking like a choice of a rest day, and or you have something come up and you can't make it to the gym, and if you're not measuring your progress and like what you were doing in the whatever it was in your life, and you fall off, well, it's going to be hard to kind of get back on schedule and be on a consistent routine. So, and then timely is something that Pat was talking about before, that giving yourself like a deadline. It's something anyone who's gone to school or any kind of project is going to know what that is. And it's, at this point in time, I'm going to do this. And whether you fall short of it or you achieve it, if you give yourself a deadline, at least you're moving closer to your um, anticipated outcome of what you want. So I think that's something very good to bring up. And I think it's something that it's a little more specific and a little more analytical, but it's something that is a good concept to have. And the I kind of went out of order. Realistic was the last one that I didn't talk about. Obviously, we talked about before with the concept of you don't want to make these things too difficult but too easy. So you want to make them realistic to kind of where you are
Mhm.
currently. Are you a beginner or an expert?
Yeah. And you have to start small. God, I love quotes. The man who will move a mountain will first begin by carrying away a few small stones. So it's like you can't move. So to go in that CrossFit gym, to see some of these records, and when I worked at Rutgers in football, especially years ago when I was in grad school, they always had a record board. It's like, dude, this guy's squatting like 650. It's just, or he's deadlifting that and he's benching five. And it's just, my gosh. And it's like, well, yeah, but it takes time, time day after day after day after day. It's, yeah. So I think it's fantastic. I think a lot of what we're trying to do is just, again, it's not like, I struggle with this on a daily basis, but certain things, for whatever reason, again, part of the reason why we came together with the podcast is we just both got into a point in life where a lot of things we're talking about are things that were able to click with us, that we're relaying to you, and we can give it to you, first person. Like, here's exactly what I went through. Here's the stuff I struggled with. Here's what the literature says. Here's what we're able to take in and consolidate and use from our own experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so to recap a little bit, you gotta be able to change your identity. The word change, you have to be willing to accept that you need to change. Like, you have to change. So you
And to
can
add to that, like changing, everything's changing, right? Like I love
everything's
when people
changing.
talk about that. Your body, we're gonna get scientific. Your skin, your red blood cells, like everything's
Turnover.
changed. Yeah, like after a certain period of time, the seasons, like the stock market, like all like it's not just talking about like nature and humans, but like all these things are changing. The only thing that some of us are not choosing to do is change our habits and our rituals and things that may not be serving us. So
Right. Change will happen to you whether you like it or not. It's, are you changing for the better or are you changing for the worse? So you have to change either your mindset or change your environment. Your environment's probably, to a certain degree, going to be a little bit easier than changing your complete mindset. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the ultimate goal is to change your mindset, because for certain things, it doesn't matter where you put me. I'm just going to have the same mindset. I'm going to be the same person. I'm going to have the same personality, same energy. The idea is, become, do the steps that you need to do to become the person that you want to be. And to become the person you want to be, you're going to have to do things that you've never done. Like, to have the things that you want to have, you're going to have to do things that you've never done. That's the whole concept of the change. But you need to figure out where you want to go. And that's where those SMART goals really, really come in play. That's where good clinicians, a good PT, a good nutritionist, a good strength coach or personal trainer, a big part of what they're going to do is that Goldilocks concept. They don't want to make it too easy. They don't want to make it too hard. But the analogy I gave, or example I gave of going to the gym and standing on a treadmill, that's not too hard for some people. So I know for some, it's, hey, my goal in life has always been to deadlift 405. I want that extra plate. But for some, it's not even picking up the bar. It's being able to like bend over. being able to tie your shoes. Like you're in a field. I've worked and researched with that clinical population, and we're speaking to everyone. The cool thing about our message and why we named this valued pursuit is it's the same. You can apply this message to anyone. Doesn't matter if you're the most fit individual on the earth, right? Or if you're an individual who you're just trying to be able to tie your shoes or brush your teeth or get out of bed and walk down the stairs. The message is the same. Break it down into small chunks. Change your mindset that I'm going to be able to do this because I'm willing to do what I can with what I have. And that's all it's going to take. Plan it, schedule it, change your environment. That's what I got, dude.
Yeah, just remember, like, everyone that you aspire to be like has eventually started at one point or another, probably where you are right now. So I think that's a powerful thing to know. It's the whole concept with, like, Pat and I were joking around with. I don't know if it was on the episodes or not, or any of the prior episodes or not, but like, we've been to the moon, so we've been to different planets. So it's like, don't listen to people. The whole realistic concept's great, but like the things that you think aren't possible in your head, well, they are possible, and you can do it. And it's, again, taking that first step, making sure you're in the right environment. And something we didn't really touch about is people that support you and believe in you and bring you up, and any kind of good positive energy, like Patrick said, is going to support what you're trying to do and not going to judge you for where you're at currently. They're going to want to help you. So made a post about that not too long ago on Instagram about, like Pat made the example of the environment. And if plants are dying in your, garden, you're not going to blame the plants. It's the soil in which they live and the environment in which they're, are they getting enough sunlight? Are they getting enough water, etc.? So analyze your environment too, and make sure that that's in the optimal conditions for you to use the SMART principle that we talked about and keep moving forward and crushing your goals. And we're here for you.
Yeah, and environment's not just physical, environment's social. What do you listen to? Who do you see? Who do you talk to? All those things are influencing you. So you need to change yourself. You need to have that internal dialogue. And when you win the identity from within, no identity from without can stop you. You will become unstoppable as you find, what is it that I value? What is it that I want to pursue? So, all right, man. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, as usual, make sure you post your comments below on this episode for whatever it is that you are currently setting on your schedule to pursue and hold yourself accountable to. And no matter how small it is, we want to hear about it. And we'll make sure that on our next episode, we check in and we try and give you guys a little encouragement for that, to keep successful with those affirmations that you may have, those goals and things that you want to do in this new coming year. And we're super excited for our next guest on episode 6 that we think you guys will be able to really resonate with and learn a lot from. So yeah, awesome. Thank you for your time, Patrick, as usual.
All right. Oh, it's always a pleasure, man. All right.
Always a pleasure. Likewise.
See everyone later.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Just by being here, you've already made a step in the process of growth. As John Maxwell said, change is inevitable, but growth is optional.
We are excited for what is to come with more guests and more content on our expertise. But we want to ask you, what are you interested in learning more about? Post your comments below.
We hope you're enjoying this experience of a valued pursuit in life. And if you are enjoying it, don't be afraid to hit that like button and consider subscribing and maybe sharing the video with someone you think could gain value from it.
Our mission is to grow so we can continue to bring on valuable guests, provide content on topics of relevance to your life, and grow the show across the globe.
You ever have a vision? Something you see play out before it happens? They say that the scariest thing in life is not growing into your potential, not recognizing the person you were created to be. We are on a mission to help everyone on this planet chase that version of you, your most fulfilled self. Created here in the USA, Reinvent Co. is now releasing their one-off hoodie in a full zip design, premium quality fitted to your physique to show you are chasing greatness in all aspects of life. Wear a garment that shows your potential evolving over a lifetime and become a part of a brand where humans connect to knock down the obstacles they face for endless refinement and continuous improvement.